Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have with us Robert Pasin. Robert is the Chief Wagon Officer of Radio Flyer, an iconic brand that his grandfather started the company in 1917. He took over as the CEO, Chief Wagon Officer, in 1997, and he's going to share some thoughts on how that he's taken the brand, continued to grow and build it, and looking forward to our conversation today with Robert. It's great to have Robert Pasin join us for our conversation, and he's joining us from his office in Chicago.
It's good to be here, Mark. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess first off, can you give us just a little bit of an overview of your career, and I'd love to hear your story.
Sure. Well, it's pretty simple because I was born into the into the family that owns and runs Radio Flyer. So my grandpa started Radio Flyer 103 years ago.
Wow.
So I really grew up in the business. I mean, the first time I came here was when I was 5 years old. Came in the building, and I remember that day like it was yesterday because it was the first time I'd ever gone to work with my dad. And
Sure.
I remember holding his big hand and walking around the building, and the sound of the punch presses stamping out steel wagons and the smell of paint. And that's really when I, first started to fall in love with Radio Flyer and what it means to people. So I graduated from college in 1991, and then I did a year of volunteer work where I taught sixth grade on the west side of Chicago. And then I came into the business. So I came in really young and green and clueless and learned a lot.
Sure. Well, tell us a little bit, and I ask this of most every guest that we have on, if you're able to spin back time knowing what you know now, what advice would you give a 22-year-old Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I'd give this advice to anybody too, is just find great mentors, find great coaches, find the leaders that you want to become like, and be a student. I mean, really, it's just be a sponge and learn as much as you possibly can, but find the people that you want to emulate and learn from them.
So you stepped into the business in, was it 1997 as the CEO? Is that correct?
Yeah, I started in 1992, and then I became the CEO in 1997. So pretty quick.
Yeah. So thinking about kind of that transition, you were in the company, but talk a little bit about kind of where the company was at when you stepped in, and just what were some of the changes that you needed to make?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I took over from my dad, and and my dad had led the company very successfully for many years. But like any company that's been around for a long time, we had our ups and downs, and this was a down period. And one of the first things that happened that really threw us into crisis was that competitors came out with plastic wagons. And at the time, we were really, all we made were steel and wood wagons. And we had done that for 70 years, and it had been very successful for 70 years. But these plastic wagons offered features that consumers really liked, like built-in seats for the kids and cup holders and things like that we didn't have in our wagons. And it really threw us into a crisis because those plastic wagons started taking sales away from our flagship cash cow, the Town and Country wagon that had been a bestseller for 30 years. And we had to ask ourselves all kinds of questions of like, are we going to get into plastic wagons? Will a consumer even accept a plastic wagon from Radio Flyer? We're such a nostalgic brand. We didn't have anybody in the company who knew about those manufacturing processes. So it was a really steep learning curve. And it was an incredible opportunity for me being so young. And because I was part of the family, I was in a lot of meetings I never would have been in another company where we're talking strategy and what are we going to do and how are we going to figure it out. And so ultimately, we did figure out the plastic wagon thing. We found a design firm to design them. We found a manufacturer in the Midwest that could manufacture them for us. And that's when we started to really start to reinvent the company.
So thinking thinking about you have an iconic brand. In fact, I was telling a couple people that that you're coming on to for the podcast, and they all were telling me how many radio flyers they had in their family, and we started taking count in our family. We've got grandkids now that have them, and so you've got an iconic brand, and again trying to navigate that and keeping that brand alive, but also kind of changing maybe some of the culture in the company. Talk a little bit about that, some of the things you did.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we had, this brand, and people had grown up with it, and there was all these positive associations with the brand. They remembered being outside, the wind in their hair, the sun in their face. And so we started to really key into those brand attributes that people remembered and loved about Radio Flyer, and started to ask questions about, well, what other products could we make? How can we grow? Can we do things beyond wagons? And at the same time, we had a culture we were basically a factory. I mean, if you walked into our building and asked, what do you do here? People say, we're a factory and we stamp wagons out of steel. The Radio Flyer brand wouldn't have been the first thing people would have said. So we started to really realize that the brand was what we had. The relationship with consumers is what we had. And so we had to go from becoming this factory to a really innovative product design company. And so we started hiring engineers and designers. And then we also had to part ways with people who weren't going to get us where we needed to go. And that's never an easy thing, but we did it over time. We did it through early retirement. And over the years, by changing out the members of the team, we started to really change the culture.
Talk a little bit about the history. And somebody asked me, well, where did the name Radio Flyer come from? I know the story, but talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, my grandpa, as I mentioned, was an Italian immigrant, and he came to Chicago in 1914. And like so many immigrants, he did any job he could find, and he did a lot of really tough, kind of backbreaking labor on construction crews and things like that for several years until he was able to save up enough money to rent a garage on the west side of Chicago. And because he had learned carpentry skills from his dad and his grandpa, he put those skills to work building furniture and phonograph cabinets, and eventually a wooden wagon that he called the Liberty Coaster, because that's the first thing he saw when he came to America was the Statue of Liberty. And then that's where he really found his success. The wagons started selling. He started to scale up this wood wagon factory and hire workers. And then several years later, he was visiting a steel a supplier, and he saw this metal stamping technology from the auto industry. And he realized that if he could stamp his wagons out of steel instead of making them out of wood, he could mass produce them. He could bring the price down. This is what really resulted in the invention of this iconic Little Red Wagon. And to answer your question about the name that he chose for it really had nothing to do with the product. They were just two cool buzzwords at the time. They were the two greatest inventions of the day, the radio and the airplane. So he put Radio Flyer on the wagon. And I like to say, maybe if you were naming it today, it'd be something like Quantum AI Dronester, would be the equivalent.
Right.
But yeah, that's where the name came from.
Okay. Well, we talked a little bit before we got started that we're living during an unusual time, and a lot of conversations are happening right online and through Zoom meetings. What are some of the pivots that you've had to make as a company during the last 8 months during COVID?
Yeah, well, we went from a completely 100% work in office team here in Chicago to a mostly work from home team. So that was a huge change for us. And we did it, the team did it amazingly well. And the team has been really, really effective. But that's one of the biggest things. Another thing is that we thought, we were really worried about our sales and the potential downsides from, the economy and everything. But then we started seeing in March and then in April, actually some sales increasing because consumers and families were turning to our products because they couldn't go to the park. They couldn't go to the zoo. They couldn't go on vacation. They couldn't go to the amusement park. So a wagon ride around the block was a socially distanced way to, maybe visit the grandparents, or a tricycle ride around the neighborhood was kind of like a mini vacation, to get the kids out of the house from bouncing off the walls. So
Sure.
we feel really, really fortunate and lucky that we have been kind of a bright spot in people's lives during this challenging time.
So in the company, how did you keep up as far as production and that during that time?
Yeah, I mean, there were huge swings because we were thinking, we could be down really big percentages, and so we just ramped up. As soon as we monitor our sales with our retail customers like Walmart and Amazon and Target, and we can see how our products are selling, every product at every store. And so we started really, really studying those numbers and looking for trends. And as soon as we saw which products were selling more, we just jumped on it. And fortunately, because it was early in the year, we had more time to react to it, as opposed to if it were happening, now or in the fall.
Robert, I've read a little bit about something that you've instituted, and I don't know if this was right when you took over as CEO, but it's called Wagon U. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that's about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we started to build the culture and the team, we wanted to create a really world-class leadership and development program, even though we're not a huge company. And so we just started to put, pieces together, some classes that we teach ourselves, the leadership team teaches, like I teach a class to every new flyer. We call it Breakfast with the CWO, because I'm the Chief Wagon Officer. And in that class, I talk about a lot of my product failures and mistakes and learnings through the years. We have a class on, Radio Flyer Products 101. It just goes through the details on our product line. But then we also send people to leadership development classes and use external resources. And we've branded the whole thing as Wagon U, of course, because it's still fun and playful, and we're learning.
Sure. So you have a new product line. Was looking on your website. It's pretty cool. It's the Tesla, which is definitely kind of that next generation product. Talk a little bit about that and how that came about.
Sure. Well, we were looking at getting into these, battery operated cars for kids. And when we study a product category that we're not in, the first thing we do is go into consumers' homes, in their garages, in their backyards, in their driveways, and do a lot of observational ethnographic research and just look for problems we can solve. And they may be small problems, but how can we make the product easier to use, more fun to ride? And our team saw that with the existing products, all the battery operated vehicles used traditional lead acid batteries. And the parents would complain a lot that the kids loved to ride these, but oftentimes they'd go to play with them and the battery was dead. And then it took a really long time to charge them up. They'd have to charge overnight. And so our team said, well, we could solve that problem if we use lithium-ion batteries, like in power tools or on your iPhone. But the challenge was they're a lot more expensive. And then our head of product development said, well, if we're going to use lithium-ion batteries, it should be a Tesla, because that's the coolest car on the planet. And well, this was 7 years ago. So this was pretty early on in Tesla days. And we got really excited about the idea, and we approached Tesla. And I think we really won them over because we weren't just pitching them a car with a lithium-ion battery in it. We were pitching them the entire Tesla experience miniaturized. So just like you buy a Tesla online and you pick the color and you customize it, that's what we were proposing to Tesla. And nobody had ever done that before. So they loved the idea, and we started doing it several years ago, and it's been a huge success.
Great. I think I see one behind you. Is that?
Yeah, this is our newest one. This is the Model Y. So this is
okay.
This is not electric. This is what we call foot to floor. So it's just a little one that a little guy can sit on and push along with their feet.
Okay.
We just launched that a few months ago.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I was had an interview with one of the executives at NASA a while back, and we were talking about the joint venture with Tesla for some of the new rocket launches and that. So definitely they're kind of branching out in a lot of different areas for sure. A number of our listeners are new leaders or up and coming leaders. They're maybe moved into one of their first leadership roles. Thinking back to your kind of that taking over as a leader within your company, what are some things that you wish you would have known putting together a team or inheriting a team as far as leading?
Yeah, I mean, the team is the most important thing. So, I mean, the first thing is that it's the people first. I was running around trying to come up with products to sell and get sales going, which was fine, but I did that maybe to the expense of building the team in the early days. And I think if you're building a team, one of the most important things is to define the job that you're hiring for with goals and action steps, really specific, specifically what you want that person to do versus kind of fluffy job descriptions. Right. And then try to interview people with questions about past behavior. What did you do in that job? What did you accomplish, so that you can match up what they did with what you need them to do, which sounds very simple and easy, but it's hard to figure that out a lot of times. And then I think hiring people for values and commitment is probably the top thing. I mean, if they have those skills, but they don't have the values and they don't have the ability to commit deeply to, what you're trying to do in your company, then it's most likely not going to work.
So as you continue to grow and develop, I see you have a number of books on your bookshelf. Are there any books that you would recommend to an up and coming leader?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, I think there's a lot that everybody kind of knows about, like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and Good to Great, and I would certainly read those. Mm-hmm. I think some of the ones that have impacted me the most, though, are Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I read in high school, and I just reread again actually in March at the beginning of all this. And he was a survivor of a concentration camp, and one of the key themes in his book is that people can endure any how if they have a why, and it always is it always puts everything in perspective. When I read somebody who's gone through such a horrific experience like that, I realize my problems are not right. They're not that bad. They're it helps put things in perspective. Another one is Drive by Daniel Pink, and that is all about what motivates people. And when I read that several years ago, it really changed the way that I thought about rewards and incentives and getting people motivated at work. And his book is all about the fact that intrinsic rewards are much more powerful than extrinsic rewards, and I think that's really true. So those are some.
Great. So outside of work, what do you like to do to recharge?
Well, running has been a huge part of my life for 20 years now. I started running to get in shape and to manage stress, and then I just really fell in love with it. And spending time with my wife and kids would be the other main thing I do. So any parting advice that you'd give to a leader? The most important thing about being a leader is to build yourself as a good leader, because everybody hears the saying lead by example, and it's like, yeah, of course, lead by example, but to really do that well is really hard, and everybody's watching you all the time as the leader, and you can't hide and you can't fake it. So to really build yourself as a leader by seeking out feedback, by being humble, by being a student, and if you do that really well, that takes care of a lot of what it takes to be a really good leader and build a really good leadership team. Well, I sure appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk to us, and definitely looking forward to seeing what other products you have come out. And definitely, if somebody want to learn more about your company, what's the best way to do that? Yeah, I've been on LinkedIn a lot lately. I love LinkedIn because I learn a lot from it, and lately I've been sharing things that I've learned and through the years. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Great. Well, thanks so much. And we're recording this before Christmas. And if you haven't already checked out and to see what's out there, check out the website for some great gift ideas. Thanks so much, Mark. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.